Hey,
Josh, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. Let's please, everyone, give Josh a big round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'm going to turn things over to Juliette.
Wonderful.
Hello, everybody. So take a deep breath. I know it's hard to watch. I'm glad that I watched it before. So take a deep breath. Jefferson, thank you so much for joining us, and it's a real privilege and pleasure. I do want to words. Can you hear us well?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, couple of words. First of all, you know, the Greater Brook Jefferson Arts Council does an amazing amount of work all around this neighborhood. And even though I've been living here for 12 years, I didn't know all the amazing things that they do. So just to tell you that all the music festivals, the Dickens Festival, this amazing documentary, everything pretty much that we see around town on the cultural side, that's what the council does. Our executive director is here. Thank you, Anu, for doing it for 30-something years. Everybody at the entrance and everybody in the back, everybody is a volunteer. And of course, I have to thank Kelly. She's new to us, just as I am. I'm new to the board, for bringing this amazing documentary series to us. And of course, we have many more coming. I hope you'll pick up the list of the rest of the films. And by the way, the information about our animal rescuers are also in the back on the table. Please take it, support the Arts Council, please vote for us, for Dickens Festival, and for documentary. The nomination has been for Best Page, Best Of. So please, if you have a chance, vote for the council. They do an amazing amount of work. Now, turning back to Ukraine. As you can see, I have been wearing these colors for almost 3 years now, and as it happened, I was born in Kharkiv.
Oh, really?
So yeah, so not only this terribly unjust and really illegal in every sense of international law, as an attorney, I can vouch for that. It is illegal and unjust, but and it did start in my hometown of Kharkiv, although I didn't go out on Long Island. This whole war kind of changed my perspective, and so I'm going to be wearing these Ukrainian colors, unfortunately, I think for a while more, because this war is just continuing. Couple of really important points about this film. And again, Joshua, I think you did an amazing job, and I'm going to ask you to tell us how this came about. But just as of course, all the devastation of war is horrible. The loss of infrastructure, the loss of residential facilities, the loss of human life. It's for us as Americans, we can't identify with any of that, because other than September 11th, we really have never come close to war. It's unbelievable what's going on there, and unfortunately, Ukraine is not in the news much. So thank you, Kelly, again, for bringing this film. Gives me an opportunity to remind people that, as unbelievable as it is, there is a war in the heart of Europe. But in all that, what is lost, and I think what this film makes so important to realize, that there are animals, and that the animals, just as one of the volunteers said, animals are also refugees. And it's very easy to lose that connection. You know, we as Americans, we love our pets. I don't know about you guys, but you know, we have completely humanized my 4 cats. And that's what we do as Americans. And we're also support charities, and we love supporting all kinds of rescuers in this country. But in the setting of the war, this film just brings out the best in human nature. And these volunteers who really, these volunteers look just like my students. It's unbelievable what they're doing. And 2 things that many of you might not have realized, but I want to mention before we talk to Joshua, is that the volunteers there, they spoke both Russian and Ukrainian languages. And the stupid war has started under the pretext of languages and differences. It's all nonsense. So that's number 1. And number 2, at the end of the film, as you have probably realized, some of these young people went to serve in the army, pretty much like the parents of a few students that I have at Stony Brook on campus that came to us after the war. Their families are back home, and 4 of their fathers are serving in the army. So that brings home to me every time I see them, and I check with them weekly to make sure that everybody's okay. So just keep in mind, even though we're not thinking about Ukraine, we're really focused on what's going on at home and the elections. It's as unbelievable as it is, there is a war continuing, and the animals are not only the ones in the zoo. I understand that there is also another major problem with the pets that have been left homeless and without their human family. So thank you for doing this project. I think it was very, very important. So I have to ask you, how did this project come around? And how many times were you there in the Eco Park in the middle of the war?
Yeah. So first of all, and can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great.
Great. So number one, I did an animal film before. I did a film about a whale that calls out at a unique frequency that from any other whale. So I really fell in love with doing animal films. And what made me fall in love is just the emotion that we seem to have when talking about animals. It's so unique. And I was always intrigued by war and like many filmmakers, you know, they want to do a war film. Well, I was intrigued by the war, and I saw an article and some video on the front page of the New York Times about 3 months into the war about a chimpanzee named Chi-Chi, who you see in the film. And Chi-Chi had escaped from the Kharkiv Zoo and was walking through the middle of Freedom Square. And a whole bunch of the locals in Kharkiv took these videos of this chimp just strolling through the middle of Freedom Square. And it was just in one beat, that idea, that juxtaposition. Here you have a chimp searching for its freedom while the Ukrainian people are searching for their freedom, both being held captive. And also, you could see the war on the Kharkiv people's faces, but the minute they see this chimp, suddenly it all goes away for one brief moment. They forget about the war, and that's the power that animals have to suddenly snap us into a new way of thinking. And so we apply that to this film, a rescue film about saving animals. We wanted to make a film that supported Ukraine, but to do so in a different way, through the eyes of saving animals. It allows us to think about this war in a different circumstance. It doesn't become about politics. It becomes about selflessness, empathy, compassion, you know, and that's something that the Ukrainian people have in spades. When you see, you know, there's that famous Gandhi quote, right? You could tell, you know, you could tell that much about a nation by how it treats its animals. Well, look, because this is the example. You can also see it in the footage. Whenever you see, and remember, there were mass evacuations. We're talking 6 million people. That's a huge amount of people leaving. They weren't always leaving alone. They were always leaving with their animals. They didn't want to leave their animals behind. Their animals aren't animals, they're family. And so they were fighting to leave with their animals. And that, again, that just shows about the people. Now, your question about how many times did I go? I went twice. I went 6 times. I went about 6 months into the war, into Kharkiv. This was before the Ukrainian people had, the army had pushed the Russian forces away from Kharkiv. This is like the counteroffensive, as it's known. So this was before then, and we were going into a war zone. I had to fly into Warsaw. I got a ride down to the border. I had to get transported across the border by a woman couldn't be a man because all the men are being conscripted. They can't leave. I got to leave, and then I traveled from there. Another fixer met me, and we went all the way across the country to Kharkiv. And remember, Ukraine is huge. We're basically talking the distance of Chicago to New York. So that's what we're talking about in terms of getting across. And in Kharkiv, it was rough. As you heard, there were bombs every day, bombs while we were shooting. I went back again a little bit later, about a year into the war. This is after the counteroffensive, and it was like night and day. People were so happy. It was almost singing on the streets, and there was, flowers coming in. But unfortunately, as you've heard in the news recently, it's gone the other way again. Putin is attacking Kharkiv daily. And it's one thing, folks, to hear somebody from Kharkiv say, or Ukrainian say, this is an unjust war. I'm an American. Okay, I'm Polish. I went there, and Putin is just bombing people, elderly people, in kind of like high-rise apartments, like not indiscriminately, targeting them. And it's just like, this is not even warfare. This is something totally else. Targeting elderly people or targeting power stations. Why? Sure, it's a military thing, but they also want to take away the heat and electricity. Why? To demoralize the people so that they will say, oh, let's just do what Putin says. So I really witnessed firsthand war crimes. And it was disgusting, and it was on top of it is the disinformation. Putin's like, oh, we want to bring everybody back together. We're helping everybody. And you sit there and you watch them blowing up buildings where old people are staying. And that's obviously not true.
Well, thank you for making all those points, and absolutely correct. And as we all realize, this is the most unusual war, not because it's any, war is war, but in the age of the internet, we now know exactly what's going on. You cannot hide if you commit atrocities, if you torture animals, or whatever it is that's going on there. Somebody has it already on film, and it's already in the media. So this is the first time when we can actually see who is who and what is truly going on. And that's not to belittle all the other countries that are in crisis, and the Middle East and all the other wars that are horrible. We can now see what's going on. If you really want to, you can literally follow all of these horrible wars, frame by frame. So, Joshua, how many did you bring another set of rules with you, or were you using people there for the?
I brought one person with me. I brought a guy named Olivier Sarbil, who's a war photographer. He specifically, he had done another film called Retrograde about the people leaving Afghanistan. And so he's a combat photographer. We were going into combat zones. That was the first time, we had gotten permission from the Ukraine government as journalists, war journalists. And then we met a bunch of folks there. And then when I went back the second time, I brought a different director of photography, a gentleman by the name of Nelson Hume. And then we had a crew of about 8 Ukrainian filmmakers. Wonderful, by the way, crew and artists all in their own right. It's even funny because I haven't told this story, but Sean Penn went to Ukraine, right? He did a movie about the government there and Zelensky, but he also went there to be in another film about it was a bunch of short stories. And one of the short stories was about an American sound person who was there doing a documentary about animals. This was a narrative short film. And so I was joking with my Ukrainian sound person. I was like, oh, Sean Penn is going to play you in a movie. And he laughed. And then he goes, Joshua, you'll never believe this. Sean Penn came to me to get my advice about making a movie about being a documentarian about the animals. So it's very interesting, everything that's coming out about Ukraine. And it was just such a fascinating experience. The other thing, and this was a point that you brought up, Juliette, is the people were speaking Russian. Okay. The people in Kharkiv, Russia's only 30 miles, right? So essentially, and forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, essentially everybody's somewhat Russian, right? Because it was all together at one point. So they're speaking Russian. The culture is Russian. If you know Svetlana, the woman in the film, she is cursing up a storm in Russian. She's like a sailor. She's the mouth of a sailor. And all their family is pretty much across the border in Russia. So I said, guys, if you're so Russian, why not just accept Putin's invasion? Is it really worth your life? Like, it was a big deal. You're Russian for a couple of years until something happens. And they said, very starkly, they said to me, no way. I'm going to fight till I die. We're not going back, because now we finally have a choice about how we want to live our lives. And that to me was a really important statement. If you want to talk about democracy, and I don't want to politicize this, but we want to talk about like what democracy brings, these people are willing to lay down their life to preserve the choice that they now, and to me, that is the best reason for why we should continue to support what they're doing. They're doing it for democracy.
Thank you for that. That's very and the choice was made. Ukraine is recognized by the United Nations and all the member states as a sovereign state. And we as this planet, as humans, made a decision that the border should never be changed after World War II by military invasion of one sovereign state or the other one. And then Ukraine happened. So yeah, this raises so many questions, but we'll open up, we'll please have your questions ready. 2 quick points. First of all, you and your crew, you were just as heroic as the people that you were filming, because you really put I know you're smiling, but you put your life on the line, because in that zone, shelling was constant when you were there. And the residents of Kharkiv, they have gotten used to hearing all the sirens and their phones beeping, because they have now an app internally where they can tell each other when the drones or the rockets are flying. So people got used to that. So you did an amazing job by going there. And I have to tell you, as a filmmaker, you did an amazing job of fusing your footage with what the volunteers gave you, because some of that footage I know was just done right there. So that's an amazing, cool, and I know you won many awards, and the film was a trifecta this summer, I think, right? So
we just won an award yesterday at the Mill Valley Film Festival, another audience award. So an interesting story about the footage. Excuse me. So I call, I hear about this chimp who's escaped, that he's escaped from the Kharkiv Zoo. This is Cheetah. Cheetah was probably trying to go back home to Eco Park Feldman. And so I had heard that Eco Park Feldman had been bombed. So I call Eco Park Feldman. I saw there was a number on the website. I called them. They don't speak any English. I don't speak any Ukrainian. Finally, I get in touch with somebody who speaks English, because not many people actually speak English in Ukraine. And it's Vadim, who you see in the film. And he goes, yes, I am publicity for the zoo. We want the world to know our story. Would you like me to send you some footage which went viral? And I was like, as a filmmaker, I'm like, yes, please. And then he's like, would you like me to send you more? And it was actually a shot of Timothy, and driving, and then it like pans over to our piers. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the cutest thing ever. And I was like, Vadim, do you have any more? And he goes, I have hours and hours of footage. I will send you all footage. And I was like, this is great. So we keep getting footage. We're looking through it. It's coming over the internet. And it's all in 30-second chunks, right? All the shots are 30 seconds. I'm like, Vadim, why is everything in 30 seconds? And he goes, because TikTok is 30 seconds, no? So we shot everything in 30 seconds. And I was like, Vadim, you can like just cut it up if you want to. But, it was very cute, and we managed to make it work. But when Svetlana and Vitaly were there in the beginning in the winter, there wasn't a lot of footage. You know, they're older. They didn't shoot themselves doing it. Once the boys arrive, because they're, you know, younger generation, suddenly they're like filming themselves here and filming themselves there, and they're doing multiple takes of it, and they've got everything set up. It was just so funny. Like the minute that the boys arrive, the film opens up because they're shooting themselves doing stuff all the time. But then you would hear Vitaly over the walkie-talkie saying, "For fucking Christ's sake, stop shooting yourselves. We've got to save these animals." So he's cursing up a storm too. So the boys, they shot a lot of footage of themselves, and thank God they did, because it helped make a great movie.
Yeah, no, and it's noticeable, again, you know, the audience felt like it was quite seamless and very impressively done, and yes, they were cursing up a storm. If you go back to the game, and there's some flying players, I never take my sons to sit anywhere in the front. So, I'm gonna ask last question, then I'm gonna turn it to the audience. It's an unfair question, but I'm gonna put you on the spot. So is there going to be a follow-up? I mean, not tomorrow, but maybe the day after tomorrow, when there is some sort of resolution to this ridiculous war. Would you go back? And you know, when I do a little bit of research, I was told that the Eco Park is under reconstruction. I'm not sure to what extent, because as you pointed out, the war is going the wrong way now. But, unfair question, would you think of going back and perhaps?
Well, my goal, and I've been outreaching to a couple of wealthy folks to help me. I want to go back to Ukraine with the film, to Kharkiv, and show the people of Kharkiv the film.
They have not seen it, right? It's, oh, right.
If I can.
Not been shown anywhere except at the festival. Right?
Yeah, I mean, only a few people have seen it, and it's really a film about their heroism, and again, the selflessness and the empathy that they have, and you know, the love that they have for this zoo. I've heard that you've been to the zoo, Eco Park. Is that correct? Yeah. You know, Feldman is an interesting character. Feldman, you know, people are somewhat conflicted about Feldman, and I understand that, and I was as well. You know, he's an oligarch, but he's like an oligarch that cries at the drop of a hat, you know, and he loves his animals. The question becomes, does he love them or does he respect them? And does he respect their sovereignty? Does he respect their freedom? It comes from a good place. He wants the people, the children, to have a place to go to see animals during the war, because he wants some kind of normalcy. And this is a theme which is very prevalent in World War II, of course. You know, if we're talking about the Blitz of, you know, the London Zoo, if we're talking about the St. Petersburg Zoo, you know, that was a huge story. The siege of Leningrad. There was a siege. There was mass. Yeah, right. Yeah, mass starvation. Thousands and thousands of people died in this siege. Mass starvation. But the zoo somehow remained this place of innocence, this Garden of Eden, if you will, in the middle of this mass starvation. People were eating each other, but they refused to eat the animals in the zoo, because it was the only place that the children could go to have some sense of normalcy. They would put on puppet shows and all these different things. And it was this one innocent, beautiful thing in the middle of all this horror. And so there is a history of having zoos in war to remind us. Here's the interesting thing, right? Especially in older Eastern European countries and cities, the zoo is always in the center of the city. It is in the center of the city because the animals are in the center of the city. It is the Garden of Eden. It is the last bastion of innocence and purity in the center of the city. And they don't want to leave that. They don't want that to be pulled out from the center of the city, because when you do that, the innocence of the city is lost. So I went to Kyiv, for example, and I said, how come you're not evacuating the animals? And they said, we can't. You know, this is the one place of hope. So despite however we all may feel about zoos, and I completely understand, there's an additional added piece here with why Feldman wants to keep the zoo and the role of zoos in times of warfare.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very astute point, and thank you. So again, amazing film. We have a few minutes. Can we have some questions from the audience? Because I can talk to Joshua forever. I'm gonna turn it over to you. Any questions? Kelly is in the back with the microphone. Anybody wants to ask anything in particular? Joshua is apparently not shy to talk politics and all that. Hold on to it.
How can other people see this movie? I feel like I want to share and let other people know about it.
Oh, thank you very much. So we're just doing our festival run. So we'll go around, we'll show it to festivals. Again, it was just at the Hamptons, so it was in Long Island. And then our goal is someplace like Netflix or CNN picks it up, and then people can see it in its on a streaming service. It's a shame. I was making the film and I didn't know, to be honest, that Ukraine would become somewhat of a political hot potato. Like I'm flabbergasted. I live in Connecticut, right? I live over in Sharon, Connecticut, and I'm sorry for talking politics, but you're in for it. There is the guy is my neighbor, right? He's in a statesman or something like that, Republican guy. And, he was a Vietnam vet. And he's like, it's crazy. Here we are, we're fighting, we in Vietnam, we were fighting communism, and that's exactly what's going on in Ukraine. But for some reason, my brother Republicans, some of them, are saying that this shouldn't be happening. And I found it so interesting that here was a guy who fought in Vietnam, a horrific war, fought communism, and then later on in life, suddenly he feels that the whole story has been twisted and shifted. And it was just amazing to me that that's what had happened, or that what has happened in Ukraine. If you want to look at it from a different standpoint, the Ukrainians are so motivated to fight because they're fighting for their freedom. It is the cheapest proxy war you are ever going to have. That's one way to look at it. If you're going to look at it from that way, but the other way to look at it is just, these are people fighting for their freedom. They woke up one day and suddenly tanks are rolling across into their streets. I mean, nobody wants that, deserves that, or expects that,
Absolutely. So we'll be on the lookout to have the film somewhere. I'll keep in touch with you, as I'm sure you figured out.
Yes, of course. And I have a Twitter account. You could tweet me at JOSHZEMAN. Or just, just go online. Hey, I saw a great documentary called Checkpoint Zoo. You should look out for it. And if you're an animal lover, please look out for it too.
Are you on LinkedIn?
Yes, I'm on LinkedIn. And if anybody wants to reach me, please do. I'd love to hear from everyone.
First question. Yes, okay, go ahead.
The film was fascinating. It was
Thank you.
eerie. I have very mixed feelings about zoos, but to see the rescue is just incredible. My one comment is the entire film should have been captioned. It was difficult at times, even when someone was speaking English, to understand exactly what they were saying.
Yeah.
It's too late to do that.
No, it's not too late. So yeah, subtitle the whole thing. It's interesting. That's always an experiment. I haven't made a foreign film before, and I said, like, I don't do Ukraine, but I will probably end up subtitling the whole thing.
Great, thank you for that. You go ahead.
You touched on this a little bit when you spoke about the zoos being a peaceful place, but I couldn't help but think when you showed the map of where some of the animals were moved to other zoos in Ukraine, were those areas then later places of attack, and were the animals kept safe?
Good question. So they were a lot of the animals, most of the animals were moved to Poltava, which is about which is 2.5 hours inside, and it's really not towards the edge. Poltava, for the most part, has remained safe, except And tragically, about 2 months ago, I guess at this point, there was an attack where 50 people died. That was in Poltava. That was directed at one of the army barracks. So for the most part, the animals are safe. Some of the animals are brought to zoos all over Europe. And it's, I'm not a big fan of Feldman trying to rebuild the zoo. I don't like zoos in general, rehoming the zoos, but this is a story about the rescuers. We are not going to solve the issues of zoos right now. But the interesting thing is that I also made the film for the people of Eastern Europe to recognize the sovereignty of animals. Eastern Europe is about 20 years behind where we are in terms of their caring for animals, in terms of just their recognizing the sentience of certain animals. Of course, there are certain groups which are more advanced, but just in general, it's a little bit behind. In fact, circuses were only outlawed just very recent. And if you think about it, this goes back to somewhat of a Soviet mentality. Movies, that type of entertainment, that's expensive to make movies. But performing animals, traveling from city to city, is pretty cheap. So you have to understand like where the culture comes from, the dancing bears and things like that. A lot of places in Ukraine, not really Ukraine anymore, but mostly more Russia, but used to be in Ukraine, they had animals in restaurants as some sort of petting zoo, as some sort of entertainment. Lions too, not just like goats and things like that, but lions. And only recently has that also been, people are starting to put a kibosh on that. What was interesting is Yelp. They do have Yelp, right, in Ukraine, and people were leaving messages for one restaurant like, I like the restaurant, but I wasn't too, the lion outside made me feel a little uncomfortable. And the owner was like, oh my God, I don't like keeping the lion either, but I thought all the restaurant goers liked the lion. Now that I know everybody's uncomfortable by it, we're not going to keep the lion anymore. So, slowly everything is changing for the better.
Thank you for that. We have more hands. We have time. No more questions.
Okay, well, I've got a question. Josh, what are you up to next?
Very good.
A
Thank
lot
you.
of irons in the fire.
So some of you may know, but I do crime as well. Crime with a social justice angle. Speaking of Long Island, I made a film and a doc series with Alex Gibney in 2014 about the Long Island serial killer, but at the time he had not been caught, and why, as a society, we were holding prejudice against sex workers, the opioid epidemic, police malfeasance in Suffolk County, and all and everything going on there. I did not know the level of corruption that had been happening in Suffolk County. I don't think many people did, and now that has obviously come to a forefront. It is not every day that you have a district attorney that goes to jail. So, or a police chief who goes to jail as well. So I'm going to go back to another crime story, one about another wrongly accused individual in a New York City crime that everybody knows about, the Eton Pates case. So that will probably be my next one. And then, I like to go back and forth, a little bit of the darkness, a little bit of the light, a little bit of the darkness. So I will eventually make another animal film. Somebody was talking to me about making an animal film, interestingly enough, about another zoo, a story, the Baghdad Zoo, when we invaded during Saddam Hussein's reign the second time. There was a zoo in the middle of the country, and U.S. soldiers went in and saved a whole bunch of animals from there.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, we're going to be on the lookout for your amazing work in the future. Hopefully we'll get a chance to preview your other amazing films. So I would like to thank you for your time and for zooming in. You're originally from Long Island, right?
Yes, I'm from Seacliff. And my dad, just so everybody knows, big shout out to Port Jeff. My dad was at St. Charles St. Charles Hospital for many years. So I was in Port Jeff for quite a while during college, coming back and forth in Belterre. Love Port Jefferson. And I was originally born in Seacliff in Glen Cove.
Did you go from Stony?
No.
Just checking. All right, thank you so much. Thank you for your all. Thank you for the Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks so much, everybody. Much appreciated.